Hi everyone, welcome back, and today we're going to look at methods and contexts. Obviously, as you can tell, I'm just filming my iPad, and this video is going to be a bit messy because I'm going to be writing notes and things like that, but I thought it'd be easy to do it this way to show you the process of how to approach a methods and context question. I'm going to give my usual disclaimer that I'm not an educated professional, so take everything that I say how you will, don't depend on it, things like that. This video is quite last minute because I wasn't expecting to make it as the exam's on Monday, but it was popular and everyone was kept asking, so I thought why not as part of my own revision. So we're going to start off by just going over some key things, and then I'm going to show you one that I wrote under exam conditions, and then we're going to look at what a good one looks like, and then we are going to plan one out together. So, methods and context. Key information. So what question is it? So it's on paper 1 and it's question 5. How many marks is it worth? It is worth 20 marks. So that is a quarter of the paper is your methods and context. That's quite a lot. How long do we have to write it? We have 30 minutes to answer the methods and context question. That's roughly, depending on how long you take to write. And if you have extra time, obviously you'll have more time to write it. But this is just a sort of guidance if you ever wondering, well, how long should I be spending? The pervert approach, and for those who don't know, that means practical, ethical, reliability, validity, examples, representativeness, and theory. So all of them are more important than the actual education context itself. So research methods alone with no wider educational context can score you 12 out of 20 marks, And you might think, oh, well, that's not quite a lot. But the average marks that people get on this question around the whole country each year is around about 8 out of 20 marks. So if you can get really good at those research methods analyses, and then when you start to incorporate your education knowledge, then you're almost set to go. And then also a tip I'd suggest is avoid juxtaposing paragraphs. So what I mean by that is, don't write one paragraph saying why something's really, really, really brilliant, and then a complete separate paragraph. You're just repeating yourself but saying why it's bad, because you're not really bringing anything new to the conversation. You can say why something is good and why it is bad, but do that as an AO3 kind of way, saying however, it'd be better if you did this instead, rather than doing a whole complete paragraph, because it's not showing that you have a wide range of knowledge. It's quite limited to the examiner if you were just using 2 paragraphs on just one idea, for example. So how do we approach the question? So I would suggest do not read the item first. And you might think, but why? We need the item, we need to incorporate, and the item can give you ideas. Yes, it can, but it can also help you lose your train of thought, and sometimes the items are really weak, which we'll have a look at as well. So if you just start by reading the question first and then pervert analyse it, you can start jotting down all your ideas based on the question, and then the item might be able to help you rather than hinder you. Because sometimes we get too hung up on the item and depending on it, and it restricts our own thoughts with what we already know. And like I've said there, the item can be used later on to kind of piece the puzzle to make your writing look nice altogether, basically. So the mark scheme. So we're starting at the bottom. So like we've said, 12 and below is your knowledge on research methods. So like I say, you can get, the highest you can get is 12 alone just off research methods if you didn't talk about education whatsoever. 13 to 16 marks is when you're starting to introduce your educational context, but it's quite broad, so it might not be specific to the question what it's necessarily asking, but you are still showing that you have somewhat of an extent of knowledge about how these methods might work. And then for the top bands, so that's your 17 to 20 marks, you're starting to use context that is specific to the issue displayed in the question. So it's showing that you can, apply it into the scenarios that are provided, showing that you've got a high level of understanding to the concepts, and ultimately that's what gets you those high marks. So what could actually come up on the question? So you have the groups on one side and the research methods on the other. I know it's on the right hand side, but I'm going to start with the research methods. So yeah, obviously you have your primary methods, which are your lab experiment, your field experiments, questionnaires or interviews, and also observations, which are both covert and overt. And then again, within interviews, you have structured, unstructured, semi-structured questionnaires. You can have like open, closed, self-report, like postal, like how it's distributed, online questionnaires, all those types of things. But if you want to go over that, they're all my other video. We're basing this video off, you already have the knowledge, we're just building on it now and applying it to your questions in the exam. Then you have secondary, so then official statistics, but then again, you know, you could go into that and see you have hard and soft statistics. Documents, you have different types, you know, historical, all that kind of stuff. And content analysis. And then on the other side, we have the groups. So this is how it's going to relate to your educational context. Parents. So when you're looking at parents, you have to think, well, there's different types of parents. You have your skilled choosers, your semi-skilled choosers, and your disconnected choosers. And that can also relate to things like parentocracy and things like that. So that's something to think about. Teachers. Obviously, teachers have power and status over children in education. And how does that play a role in experiences and things like that within a classroom or the education system? So obviously you'd adapt it to how the question's worded, but these are just quick things to think about. Schools, so obviously you have different types of schools. Is it an academy? Is it a private school? Is it a grammar school? Single-sex schools? All that kind of stuff, you know. Just keep open-minded that a school, not necessarily, and it depends on the time as well. Schools can change, as we've seen, through education policy. Then we have classrooms. So again, if it mentions like a subject choice, things like that, like how would that impact a classroom? Or what age is it? Or I don't know. You know what I mean? Like what different types of classrooms there is. And then students, obviously you have different types of students. You have those in the high sets, low sets. Then you're looking at your class, gender and ethnicity on those as well. So that's another thing to think about. I've probably missed some things out there, but just, you know, keep open-minded about the different characteristics these different types of groups have and why that is, and how that would relate to research methods, So, introductions and conclusions. You can write them. So when we talk about an introduction, you're just going to outline the method that's in the question and outline the context you have been given, but do that only briefly. It's not a requirement, like the mark scheme doesn't say, you know, student must write an introduction. However, it can be a good way to introduce yourself and provide a flow to your answer. And conclusions, see now you do have to include a conclusion, if you want to get those top band marks. So it says appropriate conclusions must be drawn. So that's for your 17 to 20 marks. A conclusion is more important than an introduction. I think I've already said that. And a good thing to write about for a conclusion is that if you're panicking, you're like, oh, I can't think of anything. Just write about how you need to triangulate with other methods to get the greatest reliability and representativeness possible, for example. So say if the question was asking about observations, you know, you talk about that, but if at the end you're like, how do I wrap this up, you know, how am I go forward to this and prove that I've got a good understanding? We'll just say observations aren't simply enough to understand how a classroom works, you know, because you might have like the Hawthorne effect, for example, if it's like a overt observation. So then you can also do questionnaires or interviews or look at grade statistics and things like that, and have different amounts of qualitative and quantitative data that you can compare in order to bring yourself closer to the truth, because ultimately that's what validity is. It's seeing how truthful your findings are. So the more methods that you carry out, the greater the validity will be. So saying one simply is enough would just not be true. So that's basically what triangulation means. It might be like, you might have been taught a difference. It's either triangulation, methodological triangulation, or methodological pluralism. But that's under that umbrella term. So that's it for my little PowerPoint. Now I'm going to go on to show you one that I have written in exam conditions. By no means is it perfect. I'm being honest here, you know, I'm not a robot, I am a student, and when you are under those exam conditions, it can be stressful. So I'm going to show you what I've wrote, and it was in relation to gender, so we'll have a look at that now. So I've got the question up that I was given. We're just going to ignore the item for now, like I've said, and we'll go back to that later. But we're going to read the question. So applying material from item B, obviously, you know, we're going to come back to that. And your own knowledge of research methods, evaluate the strengths and limitations of using official statistics to investigate gender differences in achievement and subject choice. So they're our key parts, you know, we're looking at strengths and limitations. So we're having that kind of balanced argument, you know, and then we're forming a judgment from that. We're looking at some strengths, looking at some weaknesses, and then we're going to come to a conclusion of what we believe is right or wrong. Official statistics, already our head should become right. Official statistics, what kinds do we have? What types do we have in reference to gender differences and achievement, and also subject choice? Now, what would I be doing in an exam? If I was in my exam, I'd be going straight onto an area where I have a blank piece of paper, just somewhere I've got space, and I'd be doing a big plus, and on the other side I'd be doing a big minus, and right down the middle of my page I'd just be doing literally pervert, like that. And then just a reminder, so we have practical, ignore my handwriting, ethical, reliability. It doesn't really matter which way you put the R's, but you know, validity, examples, representativeness, and theoretical. So we're going to start like that, and one by one we're going to do parts. So I'm going to quickly do this, and then I'm going to come back and show you, and we'll talk about it. Okay, so I'm back. This might look like a lot, and I probably could do more, but we're just going to leave it at this for now. So this is purely just research methods. You know, I haven't even thought about gender yet. I've just thought about research methods. So I'm going to quickly walk through it. So we're going to start with practical. Well, the strengths. A way to remember this, I always think cat. So here's my beautiful picture of a cat. And when you break it down, it stands for cost, access, and time. So the time is good because it's secondary data, so it's already been gathered, which ultimately saves time. Access, well, it's online and it's published to the public, so we can retrieve the data that way. And the cost, well, it's free, so that's how it's practical. Weaknesses of its practicality is that because it's secondary data, if you're looking at a specific topic, then what you're wanting might not be available because someone might not have researched, you know, that topic into the detail that you're wanting. And also definition of concept can change over time and it might be outdated. So say if you're looking at like the family, I know you wouldn't for a research and method. It's a methods and context question, but just say, you know, how families have changed and things like that, so that's how it might change. We're going off piece there anyways. Ethics, harm, consent, deceit are the main things to think about there. Oh, also for practicality, sorry, you can see patterns and trends over time. Official statistics tend to be ethical because they're produced by public bodies, you know, such as the government and things like that. So they have access and they have the right to do this research. And also participants are anonymous usually, so it remains all that. And there's no harm to the researcher necessarily because, you know, it's secondary data. Next, reliability. We have the weaknesses of it, and this also links in with validity. So a strengths of validity would be hard statistics, and that's the idea that like they're gathering the data for the thing that they intend to. So okay, you want to look at, I'm trying to think of an example. Right, we're going to add education in here, but say, you know, you want GCSE results, so like they will give you the GCSE results, black and white, clear as day. There's no argument about it. That's what they are. However, soft statistics, they can be socially constructed, and this can be in a way, for example, to make governments look better. So examples of that would be unemployment or poverty records. Because, for example, poverty, what actually is defined as poverty, it can be changed and manipulated in order to make a government look better. Examples of other official statistics is the 10-year national census. This is a legal requirement. It's just like a survey finding out how many people live in your home and things like that. But that can be helped to gather data. So this is representative because it uses large samples, such as the whole UK population, which can then be generalised. You might be seeing a lot of arrows here, and that's a good thing. The more arrows, the better. You want your points to link, so then when you're writing it, you can create a flow together. And whatever has the most links, that's what you're going to talk about together. I keep forgetting what I'm talking about. This is what I mean when I said this video is going to be rough, but we're going to get through it. Theoretical. Official statistics are liked by positivists, as they produce quantitative data that can be used to generate social facts. And if we go back here, you can see it links to patterns and trends over time. And then a weakness of official statistics is that it's disliked by interpretivists. And this is since that statistics might show patterns and trends, but it doesn't explain why, which lacks that empathetic understanding, also known as Verstehen, the big fancy German word. And again, that links back to the social construction of statistics. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to add in all of the education things that we need to know in order to write our answer. Okay, so as I was doing it there, I've decided we're going to take a different approach to this. And I don't know if this is going to work, but like I said, this video is very rough. We want quick content, so that's what we're going to do. So just some quick examples. So if we're looking at gender achievement and subject choice. For achievement, we can look at GCSE results, as they are a form of official statistics. And there is a 9 percentage point gap between boys and girls' achievement, with girls outperforming boys. And then if you look at subject choice, we have men dominating careers such as engineering, computing, maths, with girls going into subjects such as veterinary science, psychology and medicine. So we're going to go through the item together finally. And we're just going to go with the flow here, go with my little brain. I'm sure you'll have much more to say, but that's the beauty of sociology. We all have different things to say. So, starting off, since the 1980s, we can't talk about anything that is before then. So ultimately, my mind is going in terms of social policy. We've got the 1988 Education Reform Act. There has been a growing concern regarding a gender gap in terms of achievement. Now, this can refer to the crisis of masculinity. So basically what that refers to, for those who don't know, is that deindustrialisation, again in the 1980s, led many men, especially working class men, feeling alienated with the concept of school, because they're like, well, I'm doing all this, like, where am I going to end up? There's no jobs for me to go into. And this caused a crumble into, like, the young youths of the next generation, let's just say. And this can also lead to... Why does it not want to work? Right, I apologise. I had to do that off camera or film or whatever you want to call it, because it just kept going wrong. I think it's because it's on a Word document and they're not the best. So, we described crisis of masculinity, deindustrialisation. And what I was about to say is that you can link that to the feminisation of the school environment and crisis of masculinity. So basically what that is that there's a lack of male role models within schools for boys to look up to compared to girls. So I think it's 90% of primary school teachers are female. Don't quote me on that one. But I'm pretty sure that's right. So girls basically can seek, you know, future aspirations by looking at teachers and be like, oh, I want to be like them. And they can get advice from the teachers how to achieve that and things like that. Whereas men, they might not have that in their lives. So, sociologists have been interested in patterns of subject choice, and why is it that certain subjects are chosen more by boys and girls? So then you can link this to the idea of socialisation. And traditionally looking at it, girls were socialised into more subordinate roles in society, therefore they'll be socialised to go into more subordinate careers, leading on to subordinate careers. So the subjects would be things like, you know, humanities, English, the arts, things that have little respect and power behind them, whereas boys will be socialised into things like science, maths, engineering, computer science, things that have wealthy careers behind them. However, we can also talk about how now things are starting to change, and you have movements such as, you know, women in STEM, just and wise. So you have girls in science and technology and women in science and engineering. That's what they stand for those who don't know. So then you can talk about that. But then you can also say how just and wise links to the crisis of masculinity, because it's a threat. Women are now, there's more women doing medicine at uni now than men. And this can be a threat because traditionally men were the ones in the powerful roles, where if women are now doing that and more women are increasingly becoming the breadwinners at home, the men are like, oh, you know, that's a bit different. How do we respond to that? Crisis. Next paragraph. Sociologists may use official statistics to study differences in gender achievement and subject choice. The government collects educational statistics from every school in the country and makes these available to the public. So then, from that, we can say, okay, well, hard statistics, you know, they're a legal requirement. All schools are collecting them, so there's high validity and representativeness there. I was going to say something then and I forgot. I'm so sorry about this video, it's probably the worst one you've ever watched. Then we have statistics on both subject choice and achievement. Could be used to examine the impact of educational policies in these areas. So what I thought when I read that was the coursework removal in 2016. So basically in the new spec for like curriculum for GCSEs, there's been like a mass removal of coursework because girls achieved higher in coursework than boys, as it seemed that girls are more organised and they were more likely to go over, redraft, things like that. Whereas boys preferred more hands-on work. So, you know, when you like design technology and things like that, coursework as a whole, not to be stereotypical, but it just wasn't their thing. So that's what that made me think of. And then finally, in the last little bit, however, whilst official statistics show patterns in gender achievement and subject choice, they do not offer an explanation as to why they occur. So here where it says show patterns, that can be positivists, they like it. They like the quantitative data and how it produces social facts, and we can see trends over time. And again, you can look at how the percentage difference. So in the 1980s, there was a 4-point percentage gap between boys and girls' achievement. Then it went up to 9. Then it went back down to 7 when the course marker was removed, which was temporary. But then now it's gone back up again to 9%. So that just shows, you know, there wasn't very much why have I just forgotten what I just said? There wasn't much you know what I'm trying to say. And then a criticism of it is interpretivist, because it does not offer an explanation. So again, it's that empathetic understanding and Verstehen. So now I'm going to show you the answer that I wrote. Again, I'm not really sure what I'm doing here because I don't know how to explain method in context because I'm not the best at it myself. So this was done in exam conditions. So obviously it's going to be rough. It's not going to be perfect. This was awarded 14 out of 20. So you might think that's quite low. It's like a B grade. I mean, it's not low. It's still good. And when you think the national average is like 8 out of 20 for this question, you know, it's not too bad. But because it's not perfect, we can critique it, and you can see where my teacher has done red pen on it. So we've got professional advice on this one. But like I say, we are going to be doing it in exam conditions, and there's no point me sitting here and lying going, yeah, I'm perfect, because we're not robots. So, this is what I wrote. Using official statistics to investigate gender differences in achievement and subject choice can be useful as it creates representative data. So I got a mark for A01 there. This is since in the item it states the government collects educational statistics from every school in the country, which is your A02. Therefore, data collected is representative of the UK population. Positivists would agree with this, since not only is it objective quantitative data, but it also helps to create social facts. Official statistics have led to our understanding that there is an average of a 7-point percentage gap in girls versus boys achievement at GCSE, with all girls consistently outperforming boys in all subjects apart from maths. So here I could have critiqued it with an A03 talking about the social construction of stats. So, for example, like I say, you could talk about COVID, for example, and how that impacted the grades. You know, was that based on teacher labelling and observations of a student? And middle class girls are more likely to be positively labelled by their teachers. So that is something that I could have talked about there. Next paragraph. Official statistics are ethical in their usage due to them being available to the public. That was a quote from the item. A strength of a researcher to use official stats to look at gender differences is that they are quick and free to access. And here it says, develop in context of parentocracy. So again, you know, parents have access to go online and look at these types of things, and how does that impact a student's achievement? You know, think about that. Interpretivists would argue against the use of official statistics. This is since they do not offer an explanation as to why they occur. They would say that they don't show us the true causes lacking validity, this ultimately being due to a lack of verstehen. For example, I know that boys underachieve at school can be caused by the crisis of masculinity and the feminisation of the school environment. Many industrial working class jobs for males have been taken away from society, making boys feel lost for their future and identities. The lack of male role models in school also impacts boys' underachievement. And then on my teacher's notes here, going into more detail, males are not a homogenous group, so that basically means not all boys will respond in the same way. Yeah, they might be facing deindustrialisation, but that doesn't mean all boys are ultimately going to fail. So they also vary by class and ethnicity, and stats feed into a moral panic through selective use, I think that says. But yeah, so basically it's pumping into this narrative of like, oh god, well all the boys are underachieving at school and it's because of deindustrialisation and they've got no role models and there's too many women teachers and not enough men, what we're going to do? But boys can take that bottom-up approach, arguably, and they don't have to live up to what's expected, which is ultimately self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, if you say that they're going to underachieve, then that doesn't necessarily mean that always will, because like I said, they vary in the class and the ethnicity. Where are we up to? Official statistics can be useful to look at subject choice. For example, they have revealed that 70% of A-level psychology students are female, and the percentage is even higher for sociology. These stats are reliable as they reveal the gender gap, which students have been administered. Wait, what? These stats are reliable as they reveal the gender gap through which student has been administered to what exams. Oh yeah, so it's basically saying, you know, we find out what students take exams and what their gender is, so therefore we can make stats from that which are reliable, being hard statistics. In the item it states, could be used to examine the impact of education policies. This links to the lack of girls compared to boys in STEM subjects. Official stats has led to the creation of education programmes such as GIST, Girls in Science and Technology, and WISE, Women in Science and Engineering. These encourage more women to enter male-dominated subjects. AO2 here, you can look at the data to see if these policies have made an impact, have they? So, you know, are more women going into science and technology? And that is yes. So, for example, medicine, like we said earlier, it was traditionally dominated by men, and now more girls are going into it, especially if you go into a biology class now, there's increasingly more females. However, if you're to go in physics, for example, there is still a gender gap, so then you could talk about that. And you can also see that I haven't wrote an introduction or a conclusion, which a conclusion is important, but from what I gather, I must have run out of time. But you know, you can use this as a base structure, and like I say, it's not perfect, so then you could add your own conclusion and add there, and then do the little red pen bits, and then hopefully that should produce a high quality answer. So yeah, that brings us to the end. I hope you have found this helpful, and I'm sorry for waffling, and I'm sorry for how unstructured the video is compared to my other ones. But considering we've got 2 days now, with less than 48 hours until the real exam, this is the best you're going to get out of me, I'm afraid. But leave comments below what you'd put about this, or, you know, give advice to each other in the comments, or ask questions. I'll try and answer them as best as I can. Good luck to everyone on Monday. You're all going to smash it, and stay tuned for more videos. I'll be doing paper 2, and I'll be doing family and media, and I'll be doing paper 3, which is crime and deviance. So again, goodbye and good luck.